The next speaker is Maxim Romanov, who is a Universitätsassistent für Digital Humanities at the Institute for History at the University of Vienna. His dissertation, which he did at the University of Michigan in 2013, explored how modern computational techniques of text analysis can be applied to the study of pre-modern Arabic historical sources. And he's continued to work in that vein ever since. So he's currently working on digitizing and encoding all surviving Arabic biographical collections and chronicles, a machine readable corpus of classical Arabic texts. This is in conjunction with OpenITI, and a gazetteer of the classical Islamic world, among other projects. His presentation is entitled "As Simple as Possible, but No Simpler: Basic Principles for Corpus Organization."
Okay, Marina, thank you for introducing me. There's a bit of a outdated information there, because currently I am at the University of Hamburg, studying my own project within the mARkdown granting scheme from, apologies for sorry, Labrador emergency. Starting my own project funded within the framework of mARkdown program by DFGA. Which will focus on the evolution of Islamic societies, and actually will be devoted to the analysis of biographical collections and chronicles. So, and I was, until recently, was a member of the Kitab team, and probably, I mean, that link will never be severed anyway. So I'll talk about, even though it's kind of in tele presentations, basic principles for corpus organization, doesn't necessarily mean that these principles are universal. That's primarily what first I implemented when I was building Open Arabic, and then the principles which we kind of advanced and moved forward with within the OpenITI, and now a lot of work is done within the Kitab project. I'll start with some preliminary remarks, because it was really interesting to hear what people were saying about their projects, and there's definitely a clear difference between how things are done on different sides of the Atlantic. And what I mean by as simple as possible, but no simpler, which is a quote attributed to Einstein, but people haven't really seen it actually flowing somewhere in his writings, but whatever. The point here is to achieve maximum efficiency with minimum technological variety and minimum manual effort. So the kind of sustainability mantra, which was driving this idea from back when I started working on Open Arabic, which became OpenITI back at Tufts, is that if you need to hire a professional to have essential work done, that it's not exactly sustainable. And that's, I think, will resonate with most young scholars, because, well, come on, we can barely find positions for ourselves, not to mention to find money for a professional developer to build something for us. So that's kind of, and from here, this kind of a very practical, extremely pragmatic approach is to kind of like simplify technologies which are used in the project and increase your own digital literacy. And you kind of find a balance between those two, so that you can actually do whatever your research questions are sort of pushing you toward to. And there's also a bigger problem kind of behind that, is that well, the state of Arabic studies, Arabic and Islamic studies, Islamic studies more broadly, and the DH 2.0, because we as a field kind of missed the DH 1.0 when digitalization projects have been funded and digital resources were created. We are in this kind of DH 2.0 where the focus shifted from resource creation to analysis, but we still haven't finished our DH 1.0 stage. And at the same time, we have a huge number of digital libraries that have been created for Arabic sources, but at the same time, none of them are really suitable for analysis that is expected at DH 2.0 stage. So the number of texts, again, now talking only Arabic at the moment, is truly massive. And the OpenITI corpus that I'll be talking about already has over 1 billion words of only unique texts. And over 2 billion words if we take into account all the versions. So and what I'm interested in here is kind of, again, is something that drives me, and I think something that's in the beginning Daniel and Marina sort of exchanged about like whether the true philologist will be gone or not. No, I think it's the point here is just to make a step forward so that we could focus on analytical things kind of longue durée and big picture, as well as very, very small issues, because very often what we kind of suffer in the field is that when you work on a small problem, you kind of lose the view of the forest, focusing too much on the trees, and you don't really know how the small issues are situated in the bigger context, and that's why this kind of a large scale analysis is really necessary to provide the broad context. So and again, hence this kind of a pragmatic approach, which in business is often called 80-20. You spend 20% of your time to do 80% of work, and then 80% of your time to finish the remaining 20. So with minimum intervention into text to provide sufficient machine readability that will facilitate maximum possibilities for further analysis. And from there, three major principles, major areas of the OpenITI corpus design. First is the CTS-Like organization that provides very robust corpus structure. mARkdown, which is used for text structure, structural annotation, semantic annotation to a less extent, and analysis, and Arabic BetaCode for producing and maintaining metadata, which we store in YAML files, which is the most simple, human readable, and at the same time machine readable format. So CTS-Like organization. The corpus, as some people already know, lives on GitHub, fully openly accessible. Again, it's a pretty large corpus already as it is, and the graph here shows the kind of chronological distribution of authors in text, and you can see that sort of pre-1500, that's where we have most authors and most texts. The CTS principles, they borrowed from these canonical text services, and more specifically kind of from my work at Perseus project, the Perseus project, Perseus Digital Library, and then at Leipzig. The system was developed by Thibaut Clavis and Brigitte Almas, and I was kind of getting most of ideas, listening to how they work on this, and how the kind of the Perseus Digital Library actually works. And the major idea behind that is that there are text groups, there are works, and editions or translations, which allow you to build a very flexible hierarchical structure, which I'll show it on the example from OpenITI, which will make it easier to understand. So we have, let's say, the author ID followed by the book ID. Together, they represent the ID of a specific work. Then it's followed by a version ID, and in this particular case, this is a version of a text which is taken from a Shamila, and it had its internal ID, which was 35100. So we preserved it. Then there is a language, and after that, a reference to a specific passage, which could be identified with just a random string of numbers. So essentially, this system is very flexible and allows to very clearly refer to any point in this kind of in the succession line, so to speak. And just to give an idea, this is actually how it looks would look on your hard drive if you download any of our repositories. We have repositories which are divided into 25 year periods, Hijri years, Islamic calendar, and each of these repositories include authors who died within that 25 year period. So let's say folder 750AH. Inside of it, there's a folder data. It's again kind of following the conventions that were implemented in the CTS developed by Thibaut Clevis and Brigitte Almas. Then inside we have subfolders named by the IDs of the authors. Inside we have the subfolders named by the ID of the author, period, the book. And inside a folder, then we have as many versions of that text, that specific text, as you might see fit. And this kind of the structure allows to again to have as many versions of the same text, including translations, including manuscript transcriptions, whatnot, and anything. So it's incredibly robust. And allows to kind of to build up the corpus, to grow it without much centralized control. So that's another very valuable thing that GitHub allows us to do, is to have this kind of federated model. In order to facilitate adding new text to the corpus, we have another repository which we call Barzakh, and a series of scripts which essentially take texts submitted to that repository, and then they automatically placed where they must be in the structure of the corpus. As we develop the corpus, we publish releases, and I don't remember how many releases we've had so far, but 4 or 5 already, I think. And they all go on. The entire corpus is published on Zenodo, so that people who ever used a specific version of a corpus could then refer to a specific version of it, specific release. Because again, corpus changes; it's constantly been updated, cleaned up, expanded, and so on and so on. The second element of our OpenITI enterprises is this mARkdown. And if you remember, I'm using that funny advertisement from Mac and the PC. That was a very long time ago. So what's behind mARkdown? mARkdown was intended to be as easy to read and easy to write as feasible. And it was developed as a kind of alternative to HTML first and foremost. But now, actually, mARkdown is used absolutely everywhere if you do any kind of anything connected to the web. And it's very convenient because it's incredibly simple. So here's an example of how an HTML text looks like, and you see very traditional angle brackets, the tag in the beginning, the tag at the end of the entity, and it's all hierarchical and tree-like. And on the other side, you see how the exact same thing looks in mARkdown, and it's significantly shorter and much easier to write, much easier to read, and most importantly, very easy to learn. And so, as you might know, if you try to teach your colleagues, especially Arabists, to use TEI XML, it's a really tricky thing, especially if you have to do it manually. With mARkdown, it's actually quite easy and not time consuming at all, and people get the idea very quickly. So let me skip. Yeah, that's. Sorry, I'll just. We talked about this, so I'll just jump to the next point. And essentially, just to give a comparison again, with TEI XML as the main competitive sort of format for us. TEI, of course, it's not what I'm talking about is by no means trying to people ditch TEI XML for other formats, but because it has advantages, it's a long-standing standard maintained by the community of scholars. There are robust XML technologies that allow a lot of different kinds of manipulations. There are tons of existing frameworks that allow to publish TEI texts. And so it's an excellent archival format, but the main disadvantage is a rather poor exploratory format. So if you want to do some kind of data-driven research questions on specific text, it's rather difficult to do. And one other thing that kind of I keep observing in general among the people who do DH is that many newcomers to DH, they introduce to TEI first and foremost, and for them that becomes the DH. And they often confuse the machine readability for as a principle, general principle, with the TEI as a standard. So so that's kind of that's I think that's something that I think also that kind of negatively affects our ability to think about how we design our projects. In any case, so not necessarily there's need to be any kind of conflict between these two systems. And even more specifically, Markdown as a standard that's designed to be convertible into XML, into HTML, can be easily converted to XML. But again, here's a picture showing how actually how simple it is and how easy it is to read compared to TEI XML on the left. So again, one of the major things of kind of developing this Markdown was, so it's basic, it's very easy. It helps to keep the size of text smaller. And again, in terms of our corpus, that becomes a real problem because I think zipped the entire corpus right now is over 5 GB, and if you download everything, clone the repositories, it goes way over 15 GB. So adding detailed TEI XML tagging to that may blow up the corpus twice the size. The potential disadvantages is that you need to learn ideally some kind of regular expressions, Python or R, in order to work with texts written in this in Markdown. But you kind of, in order to do any kind of analysis, you will need to learn some of those kind of tools for XML as well. So it's a kind of a zero sum to a degree. The schema, we have the description of the schema right now on the GitHub website, which will go online very shortly. And just to give an idea how specifically the texts look when they are annotated in Markdown, this is an example. We have the metadata header on top of the file. And then the text follows. The paragraphs are tagged with just a single hashtag, and we're now reviewing kind of to simplify it even further to actually to be more closely adherent to the actual original Markdown, and it's just an empty line between the lines that indicates, okay, that's a paragraph instead of, again, XML where you have to explicitly open and close a tag. Some tags for poetry, for headers, and what's convenient, we use a text editor which allows us to kind of use the automatic folding of the text based on this headers. So one click of a button and the entire text is folded into a table of content, and you can navigate it much easier. Certain specific structural annotation elements are added, like headers for biographies, and that's essentially that's pretty much it. What's used in terms of like structural annotation of the text. But the bigger part of Markdown is actually to be an analytical tool, and to insert in text some kind of minimal machine readability in order to be able to do something with the data. So here's an example of a text on geography where the routes and distances are given, a long list from Geography of al-Muqaddasi, and the annotation pattern here describes the distances from this place to this place, such and such distance, which is then after that is very easy to with a simple Python script to aggregate into actual network and create the network, visualize it and study it as it's presented in a particular text. Here, the hierarchy is the geographical hierarchy, administrative hierarchy is tagged using another kind of like analytical pattern, which is essentially designed for that particular purpose and does not become sort of the part of the standard of our Markdown, which then allows to aggregate this data into this visualization and show how the Islamic world is divided into provinces and into smaller regions. But most importantly is this, it's adaptable very easily to specific research tasks, like this is my primary interest, analysis of biographical information, and here you see an example of a biography tagged using OpenITI Markdown tags. And what that allows us to do is to then aggregate, extract this data and aggregate into some kind of bigger pictures. So based on biographies that are annotated in this manner, we can then check from the entire book how different provinces are represented in that biographical collections, how many people were in different provinces, and this particular book is a biographical and bibliographical collection. So here we can see again through manipulation of this data to see how different provinces actually contributed to cultural production over the long periods of time, how these regions were connected with each other, and how that changed over time, how different books featured across the time period. So here's an example of books that have Radd, refutation, in their title, and you can see a huge spike of them in the early period during the formation of the Islamic religion as such. We can look at, of course, many other things. So here's an example of words and titles like sharh and hashia, and here we can see that one genre form is much earlier than another. In a sense, the second one being more complementary. The same thing with many other things, like here fiqh and fatwas, and here's the focus on medicine and tasawwuf, one been early, another been later. I'm almost
Maxim, sorry,
I'm over time. Sorry, one more
yeah,
minute.
I have to ask you to wrap it up.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, I'm wrapping up. And another part is working on Markdown for manuscript transcription. I can talk about this later, but here's an example of some experimental study where here it is. So this transcription then can be automatically converted into essentially critical edition from that. And Arabic BetaCode, that's a way, again, another idea borrowed from the classicists, to use ASCII characters in order to preserve information in more complex scripts. And here's an example of a converter that Peter Verkinderen wrote. It's available online. You write it in BetaCode, and it automatically generates the transliteration, one-to-one transliteration that can be converted into any transliteration schema that you might want, as well as into Arabic script. So that solves a problem of retyping things in different ways. And here's our example of our metadata file, where this part shown in the red square is actually automatically generated from the transliteration. So yeah, and actually we'll stop here.